Good evening, everyone. Welcome to another webinar from our MDB Live series. And today we're gonna learn how to build an application using Angular. So what we're gonna build here is agenda app. So the application which gonna show us all the events which we have today. So this is how it's gonna look. This is how it's gonna behave. And if you've been with us on the previous webinars 2 weeks back and 1 week back, you already know that we are building exactly the same app using 3 different technologies, using 3 different frameworks, which were Vue. So that was the first one, and then we did exactly the same using React, and finally today we're gonna build exactly the same application using Angular, so you guys can see how does it work, what are the differences, what is specific for about Angular and any other framework, any other library which we are using. So I hope that it's gonna give you this kind of good feeling on what are the differences. You already seen some differences between Vue and React, and now you're gonna see how we can do the same using Angular. So I hope you're gonna enjoy it. As always, we are streaming to 2 platforms. So simultaneously we are streaming to Facebook as well as YouTube. So in case you have any issues with some streaming connection, we used to have them in the past, then you can always switch to the other one. Just let me know. And there is already one question from Agenor, whether Svelte also gonna be included. Not today. This is like a pure Angular for now. So we're gonna start with this, and we're gonna cover this one in the other tutorial in the future. So we're gonna start with like the pure Angular, so you could see how to create components, how to create, how to emit events, how to send, communicate your components with each other, and so on and so on. I see that there are people still joining, so let's just wait a few more seconds and we're gonna start. Let me just quickly remind you that we have this Facebook group where you can find, where you can join, and where you can find support if you need, if you have any questions, if something doesn't work, if you want to follow our tutorials and you're stuck at a certain moment. And since we are talking about tutorials, as far as tutorials are concerned, you can find tutorial for today's lesson under this link. So if you want to follow me, if you want to follow this tutorial with me and go along, code with me, then you can just go there and you will find all the steps over there. Okay, so that's how it looks like. I see that I think we more or less have everyone. So let's start. And as always, guys, if you have any questions, please do not hesitate to ask them. If they're gonna be related to what we are doing right now, then I will try to answer them right away. And if they are related to something else, then I will be happy to answer them after the learning part, of which shouldn't take more than 1 hour today. Okay, guys, so let's start with building an empty project, empty application. So how we're gonna do that? Let's navigate to a quick start menu. So we're gonna use something which is called ng CLI. So in order to use it, we have to install CLI first. So if you don't have it, then you should run this command npm install -g angular CLI, and this will obviously allows us to use ng command line. So if you install it correctly, then you will be able to run this ng, which will show you the help. So let's start with this one, and let's create some project here. So as we can see it here, we're gonna start with ng new, and let's call it a agenda app, A for Angular, obviously, and we're gonna use style as CSS. So this is very interesting thing already. You can see. So while you are creating a new app, Angular already asks you whether you want to use CSS or CSS. So this is, well, something probably new. Obviously in both Vue and React you can do the same, but they don't ask on the very beginning. Actually, well, to be honest, Angular also didn't ask. We provided this as an argument. So, well, okay. To be honest, here there is not much difference. I was about to say that it's specific for Angular, but actually it's not. You know, I have this kind of feeling. Well, it's not really feeling. This kind of fact that Angular is more often choose for a huge projects inside the corporate. So, you know, it has some features which allows building bigger projects. Meanwhile, I'm gonna install CDK. CDK is like set of features, set of functions which we're gonna use underneath. And then we're gonna add MDB to this one, to our project, because as always, we are building the same app. So to have the same feel, the same look, to use the same components like models, we're gonna use MDB for that. Okay, let's open this in. Let's open that in a code editor. So where is my window? Okay, it's on the other screen. And what we're gonna do, we're gonna go through this project in a second. So we're gonna see what different files we have over there. Well, one more thing to mention is that, oops, this is not where I wanted to open. I wanted to go agenda up and open it here. Okay. So, well, it's gonna be challenging to cover everything within 1 hour. So I will try to focus as much as possible on the meaningful stuff. Hello, Vladimir. Good to see you here, as always. So let's finish the installation of MDB. So what they ask us to do is to update app module TS. And that's another point where we should stop for a second. So as you can already see, obviously, again, this is not really, well, now unique to Angular, but sometimes back, Angular was the only one who was using TypeScript by default. So if you don't know what TypeScript is, it's like a superset of JavaScript. So it extends this. We're gonna talk about it a little bit, but not fully. If you guys want to get to know more about Angular itself and TypeScript, I strongly suggest you to follow these two courses over here. So you have Angular Crash Course and TypeScript. So you're gonna know more about TypeScript and how does it differ from JavaScript. And there are, you know, there are many interesting things like, you know, this static versus dynamic typing. So long story make short, in JavaScript we can just say let or var, and JavaScript will decide whether this is a string or a number. While in TypeScript, you know, we still can do that. We can use type any, but we can also specify that this is a string or int or whatever, which may sound a little bit like a limitation to you. Why would you bother setting this up? But when you're building like a huge application, it actually makes it, you know, more reliable, right? Because if you know that this variable is meant only for numbers and someone will try to assign string to it, you're gonna find this during compilation, right? Not in the production. So this is much better to find out all the errors or the issues before you go to production. And this is why actually TypeScript is is really cool. So again, I just strongly suggest to go here and follow these courses. And for now, let's just continue with our application. So let's install this one. Okay, so what we have to do, we have to import MD Bootstrap. Let's find it out. So we have this source folder, which you already know from previous frameworks. And then here we have a couple of files. We're gonna briefly go through all of them. Let's find app module TS. So this is here. Now we're gonna add import MD bootstrap, and inside our imports we also gonna add MD bootstrap module, and we're gonna add for root without going much into details. For now, we're gonna update our styles and scripts, so we can already see how you can import external scripts and JS files. So inside angular.json file, so another config file here, we have it here. So I'm gonna replace it, this part, styles and scripts. So let me just paste it. Now let's install all external dependencies. So now we are installing things like charts, like font awesome, and all the things which are required by MDB. And now let's run ngserve -o, which stands for open, and apparently I must have another application running on this port. So let me kill it and let's try again. ngserve -o, which should automatically open our browser. So let's see what's going on here. Now Angular is compiling our code, is compiling our TypeScript to JavaScript, CSS to SCSS to CSS, bundling all together, and now it's starting with some kind of error. Let's see what's going on. What do we have here? So hold on. Let's run npm install again, because apparently some of the dependencies were not found for some reason. Okay, let's see again. Compiling. As you can see already, it lasts some time. Okay, for some reason we are getting this error here. Okay, let's do it differently. We're gonna download this package. So it's downloading here. So this is like predefined package for us. And let's unzip it. Where is it? 7-zip, extract here. Okay. Okay, you could probably recreate this one, but just to make it faster, let's do it like this. cd mdb angular free npm install, and let's see if this works. Fine. There must be something wrong with some installation, but yeah, as you've seen, we've been installing these dependencies here before. Here, npm install here, and it says it was installed, but then it's again complaining that it cannot find this some of them. Or it's actually missing Angular code, which is awkward because Angular, it is Angular app. Okay, anyway, let's install it, and then we're gonna have a look how on the file structure. So once it's gonna be installed, or actually we can already go through this one here. So let's do it. Okay, so let's start with structure of the files in Angular project. Hold on, let me make this bigger. So as you can already see, there are a lot of files over here. So this looks a little bit more complex than the Vue project or React project. So let's just quickly go through this one. So we have node modules here. We already know. We have source. So obviously this is the directory when we place the source code of our application, and you can already see that here under source we have this app, which is like a very first component, which we're gonna use, like a root component. Then we have some assets where we keep some assets for our website, environments, so we can define different environments, so like dev, test, and production. So, you know, if you have a real application, obviously you don't want to test in production, so you can specify like different, for example, different database for test environment. Then after the source folder, what we have else? So actually here we still have index.html. So this is like our, this is dynamically created index.html file. So this is the starting point, and this is like, as you can see here, we have this app root. So this is where we are mounting our first component. And if you check this one, look, this is our app root, right? So this component is called app root, and this is how we use it inside index.html. So whatever we define inside this component, it will get rendered dynamically over here. Then we have a few more files like polyfills, and they help us to increase support for different browsers, and we're not gonna talk about this much. We have style as CSS, so this place where we can add our styles, global styles, some file for testing, meant for testing, and then we have this Angular JSON file, which you already seen. So this is the place, the kind of configuration file. So here we can define like whether we want to use CSS or SCSS, which is our main folder, a main file, and so on and so on. So quite a lot of configuration, but obviously you don't need to bother with that at this point of time. You can just what you can do, you can just accept the default values. And so we're not gonna go much into details about this one. Let's see if that got installed. Wow, it's still installing. Okay. So let's give it a few more seconds to finish the installation, so we could start building our application. And let's already see what we have next here. Okay, now it's done. So now let's try run this one. So ng serve --o. Let's see if this is working. It's compiling. Meanwhile, we will open this new application here. Okay. So we're gonna open this studio, and we're gonna start with creation of new components. So we're gonna learn how to create components. So if you are new, okay, it's open now here. So this is our starting page. And as you can see, this is over here. Okay, so actually before we start creating components, let's learn a little bit more about components. So in order to create a component, we need to have at least 3 files. So we need to have this HTML, actually 2, HTML and TypeScript files. So let's have a look at this one, how components look like in Angular. So if you know Vue or have seen our previous webinar, you know that, for example, in Vue we had single file for component like app.vue, and inside this component we had this template part, then script, and then CSS or CSS part. Now in Angular we have separate file for each component. So let's have a look at this one. We have app.component.html. So this defines HTML for our component. We have app component SCSS, so we can define styles for our component. And we have app component TS, which stands for TypeScript, which is more or less a logic for our component. We have 2 more extra, but they are not required for each and every component, and you're gonna see it in a second. So for spec, this is for test. So if you run here, we can specify test for given component, so when you are building something, you can also create tests. So you can already see that this this framework is already prepared for test. Obviously, you know, we can test in many different ways, but then again, it has this support built in like that. And we have app module. So this is for let's say a root component. Well, this is simplification, but let's leave it like this. Okay, so let's create a new component. What I'm gonna do, I'm gonna create new folder here. I'm gonna call it components, and this is place where we're gonna store our components. Inside components, I'm gonna create a new folder called event. So this is how our component will be called. And we're gonna create first event.component.html. So that's something you already know. And we're gonna put something over here. Let's say h3 title. So this is gonna imitate our entry inside our application. And as I mentioned before, we also need this event component ts file, where we're gonna do something like that. First, we're gonna import import component from, oh come on, it's not my day today, Angular call, core, and then we're gonna set something like add component. Now open. Oh gosh, what's wrong with my fingers today, guys? Selector. It's gonna be called app event. Obviously, we could put anything here, and template URL event component HTML. So I think you already know what's going on here. And finally, we're gonna say export class event component, and this is like our placeholder. What's wrong here? What we did wrong? Template URL. What am I missing? Is it because of brackets? I don't think so. Let's see. Event component template URL. Okay, I got a typo. So, well, as you can see, we are specifying here where compiler can find HTML code of our component. So like this. We could technically also use a template here and provide HTML directly as an input, but well, in a big project, in a big components, it doesn't obviously make sense. So it's just more handy to keep it in a separate file like this. Obviously, this small part could be provided here as a template. But since we're gonna use more complicated HTML template structures, then we're gonna keep it in a separate file. Okay. For now, we don't have a CSS here because we are not adding them yet, but we're gonna add it later. Now, so for those of you who are new to Angular and haven't seen previous webinars, this is our component, right? So this is like kind of definition. So we just created component, but obviously it's not visible anywhere here because we didn't use it. So you can think of component like a definition, like a stamp. So I like this comparison that this is our component definition, and in order to use it, we have to really make a stamp. But once we use it, we can create as many components as we want. So how can we use this component now? First of all, since app module is app component is our root component, we have to import it first here. So we're gonna add new import statement here, import. Event component from, and here we provide path to components, event event component. And then obviously we need to add it to our, but not imports, but declaration this time, because this is where we specify components. So we have event component. Let's save it. And now let's try to use it in our app component. So we're gonna go to app component HTML. I'm gonna replace this default value here with some small structure. You know it, right? I mean, if you know Bootstrap, you know this container, row, and 2 columns. And this is how it looks like, right? So we have our app event here. So as you can see, you can correlate this one, app event, to this selector, right? So we could call it whatever we want, but this is a syntax. Usually you do like that, and you just need to be consistent when it comes to naming this one. Now, obviously, as I said, we can have as many components instance as we want. So that's how we can easily create more instances of the same component. So I hope you already feel this, right? That creating components allows us easily to reuse them in the future. Okay, now, obviously, when we have this component like here, so obviously this is something cool, but on the other hand, we don't want to hard code this data over here, and we have this event component. So we want to pass some data to this component, right? So for this event, we would like to have different time, and for this one, we want to have some other time. And then we have some comment here again, are saying the scale or this all dependencies, installation dependencies, missing libraries, and million of configuration files is something. It's like a wall you can't cross when you're a beginner. In Docs, everything works out of the box. Well, yeah, I mean, let me get back to this one after the webinar. I'm gonna share my thoughts on that. Okay, so we want to pass some data into our component. So what we can do in Angular is we can pass some values inside tags, right? So I want to have like event 1 here and event 2 over here. I'm gonna get rid of these events, we don't need them. And let's see the preview. We don't see that obviously because we have to change our HTML here. So in order to display this one, we have to use something which is called ng content. And now this will get replaced with that one, right? So with the value over here. But again, this allows us only to pass just a single value between the tags, and very often we want to share more, right? I mean, we want to share more data, not only the single one. So how can we do that? Obviously, there is a way to do that in Angular, and let's see how we can do it. Well, it's gonna be again a little bit complicated, but let's have a look. What I'm gonna do, I'm gonna import something else which is called input from Angular core, and we're gonna use it like this inside here at input. Like that. And now we have, this is how we define a variable in Angular. So we have a variable which is called value with type any. So it can basically accept any type of variable. As I mentioned before, we could be more specific. We could say that should be like string, ID or integer number or something like that. But for now, we just want to accept any. And now we can, thanks to that, we can do something like this. So we can say P and then value. And thanks to that, we can now use this variable over here. So I can do something like this. Value equals 5. And here I'm gonna say value equals string. We don't need that one anymore. Let's get rid of this one and let's see how it works. Okay. Now, as you can see, we can see 5 over here, but we cannot see string. And the reason behind it is this, because when we pass value like that, it's like a number. And as you can see here, we tried to pass string, but this doesn't pass the validation. So if you want to do it like this, we have to set explicitly that this is string, right? So now it will work. So this is the strict typing, right? So this kind of forces us, you know, to make sure that we are sure what we are doing, right? So as you can see, if that were JavaScript, we wouldn't spot it probably, and we could crash production like this. So the default scope is within a component. So yeah, I mean, so this is limited to the component, and yeah, I mean, you can create the global variables like you can do with in other languages. Well, other languages. Angular isn't a language actually, but like you can do in other situation. But as always, you know, using global variables usually isn't a good idea. So yes, by default, this is like scoped to the component, so you cannot reuse it, but you can obviously pass values between them. Okay, so. As you can see, this is important to know what you are actually passing to the component, because otherwise your compilator will just complain about it. Now, what is cool is that you can, instead of passing, you know, like different variables, you can pass entire object. So let's have a look at this one. What I'm gonna do here is component TS. I'm gonna define. Oh, by the way, there is this variable which is unused at the moment. I'm gonna get rid of this one, and I'm gonna create this this object event which has some time, subject, location, and description. And now I'm gonna pass this one. Let me get rid of this one. I'm gonna pass this here event. Let's see how it works. So we can see already that we are passing object here. So what we have to do to get to this data inside it, we have to update our template to something like this. So you can see value.time, value.location, value.description. Actually, that should be title probably. That meant to be title. And let's have a look at this one. Yep. It's working fine, except for the fact that we don't have title. Why don't we have title? Oh, it's subject. Okay. So let's fix it. Subject. And yeah, we have it here, right? So you can already see that we are passing complex object, which is really cool and which makes this very, very handy. Okay, now let's extend this initial data here. So instead of just single event, I'm gonna pass an array of events. So we have events, array of objects of any type, and we have this events, initial events over here. And we are doing this because now we're going to want to see how we can iterate, how we can loop inside the inside the Angular. So what we're gonna do, we're gonna use something which is called directives, and we're gonna use ng4 directive, which is a kind of implementation of a for loop. Okay, so obviously ng4 is kind of designed to work with the collections like we have here. So let's see how we can iterate through this one. I'm going to go up to app component. I'm going to remove this app event, and let's do it like this: li ng4 equals let event of events let e equals index. So what we have here, is our loop. So as you can see, we are using this ng4 inside a tag. We can use, any tag we want. And now we want to print, let's say, e, which is our index, and let's say event subject. Let's save it. And now we can see that we have our e, which is index. So we are creating index for our loop, and we are iterating through events array, and we can get access to event by typing event dot and then the property name. Obviously, that could be x, for example, right? So we could do like x. So it could be like x, and that will also work. So yeah, but we try to use descriptive names. And now, let me see what we should do now. Yeah, I mean, you might be asking what this star is for. It's a little bit, more complex. So I'm not sure if I want to go into details now, because we already have our after our start time. But if you are interested what is the difference here between this ng with star and without star, just please navigate to this lesson and you will find the whole explanation over here. And I think it's important to understand, but since we have still a lot to cover, and I want to give you like brief overview of Angular, I'm just gonna skip it. So yeah, let's just stick with what we have here, and let's just do one more step. So instead of printing this directly, we're gonna do something like this, right? So something you already know. So we are passing this event to this one. So inside li, or actually we don't want this one to be li, we want this to be diff. So we want something like this. Let's see if this works. Yeah, this is working fine. It's showing, it's displaying our events here. Okay, now let's give some style to our event. So I'm gonna update this one. So I'm adding a bit of HTML, CSS here. So now it looks like that, right? It's getting better. It's looking better. But as you can see, since we add this like grayish area here, and we don't have description for this event, because that's what you can see here, this location and description isn't mandatory. So for example, this one doesn't have description, and this one doesn't have location, neither description, right? So for those where location where is empty, we don't want to show this icon, and for those where description is empty, we don't want to show this gray. So how can we do it? Well, it's fairly easy. In Angular. So let's have a look at this one. For example, let's start with something simple like paragraph. What we have to do, you have to specify ng if condition, which works pretty much like this one. Yeah. So what we are doing, we are just stating this ng if and the condition. Now, as long as the condition is true, this whole paragraph will be displayed. And if we change it to false, then obviously this will disappear, right? So it's gone now. So pretty simple, I guess. Let's now add this one to, let's add this one to description. So for description, where we have description, description, here it is, like this one. So we're gonna add this condition, ng if value description. So this is gonna be true if there is some value in it. And let's do the same for location. So we're gonna do it here. As you can see, this is a little bit more complex because inside paragraph we have some icons over here, but this works for the entire block of code. So let's see if that's got fixed. Yeah, now we don't have this. Whenever this value is empty, we don't have this extra values over here. Obviously, since we have if, we also could use, you know, you can expect to have if else, and this is obviously true. So let me just show you this syntax because it's also interesting. So let's do it here. So we have this like let's do it like this: ng if true, else, and look what's going on here. We are providing link to something called ng template. So this ng template is a template which not gonna be rendered, or actually, hold on, which not gonna be, we're up component, hold on, okay. Let me check this one. Logged out. Hold on, I paste too much. Okay, this is here. Okay, so this shouldn't be here. Okay. So then again, so if this is true, this div will be rendered, and this one is there just in case we want to render it. So if we check this one, it's like welcome back friend, because we are true, we are logged in, and if we set it to false, it will render this one, please friend login, which is actually kind of equivalent for something like this. So we could do it more verbose like this. So we have ng container, and inside this container we will either use this template or that template, depending whether this condition is true or false. If this is true, then this. If this is false, then that. So this is how if else works in an Angular. So you know that you can use it. Okay, now let's learn how we can emit events. So how we can send events between this data, because as you can see already between components, because as you can see this icon, which we're gonna use to remove this event, this is part of event component, and at the same time the list of events is in our app component. So we need to send some message from event component to app component to remove this from the list. So how can we do it? Let's update this app component with some extra data on the right. So what we added here is counter, which is showing us the number of events in our agenda, and we have some placeholder for weather forecast. So in the future we're gonna connect this one to the real API and show it automatically for we're gonna show it automatically like a real forecast for our location. Okay, let's start with delete function. So in our app component, as I said, in order to implement this delete, what we have to do is we need function which will remove one of this event from our table, for our array. So I'm gonna define this one, delete event. So it will find this element inside our array, and then it will get rid of this one. It will just remove it. Now, inside event component, what we're gonna do, we're gonna add function handle delete click, and now we're gonna call this function. So we're gonna see how we can call this function from our template. So here is where we define function event.ts, and inside event component, we're gonna call this function here using this option, like click handle delete click. So let's save all the files and let's see how it looks now. Let's open console for a second. Let's move it here and let's click it here. Okay, so now you can see that we are invoking a function when we click on this icon, right? So this is how we invoke this is how we invoke function from template, which is defined over here. Okay, so now we have to emit our event, but before we do it, we need to import two things from Angular library. So first one is event emitter. The second one is output, right? So we had input because we were passing data into our component, and now we're gonna also send data from our component to another. So we're gonna add output. So we have like output, delete event, instance event. So this name obviously isn't a good name because Angular is calling this events, and we are calling our component events. So this is like kind of eventception. But you should think of this as a name. So let's assume that we call our events appointment. Then we would call it something like delete appointment instance event, right? So then you would clearly know that we are talking about this appointment. But since we call it event, we need to keep it. We need to keep this convention. And now we're gonna just change this one to something like that, which is like this: delete event instance, emit this value. So this is gonna emit event from our component to app component, to the parent component. And now the last thing we have to do is obviously we have to catch it. So this event will emit event, and we have to catch it in our parent component, so in app component. And how we can do that? Well, we have to specify this one in a template. So now we were just passing. So this is the input. And for the output, we are doing exactly the same. So we have this delete event instance, and we are saying to catch this one and pass event value. So yeah, we are just telling Angular that he can expect app event to emit this kind of event from themselves. I know it's crazy, so let's have a look at this picture over here, this small scheme. So what's going on? When we click this icon, which is part of event component, inside the template, this function click invokes this handle delete click. This handle delete click is defined in our event components, right? So we have this function handle delete click. Before we were just doing console log. Now we are emitting event, right? We are emitting this event, and as a value, we are providing this entire component. This is sketched over here, so app component HTML. So we are saying in our app event, hey, you can expect some events to occur from this component. So this component may send some events and you should be ready to catch it. And once you catch it, please run this function, which is defined in app component TS, right? And we are passing this argument over here. And here we are just removing this from our table. So I hope it's clear now, right? I mean, it's like from event component to event TypeScript, from event TypeScript to app component, and from app component to app component TypeScript. Okay, let's see if this works. A lot of words. So as soon as we click on it, it's getting removed. As you can see, also the counter here is updating automatically. So then again, for those of you guys who is watching us for the very first time, this is very cool for any of the libraries like, Angular, React, Vue, is that, look, what I did here is that I just, I just connected a front end of our application with our logic, right? So every time we change something to this array, Angular will automatically re-render our front end. You can imagine that if we try to do it in pure JavaScript, every time we change something on the variable, we would have to update our DOM, right? So we'd have to do something like get element by ID and then set inner text, inner HTML manually. So this is really awesome about this libraries, that they are making this part of development life much easier. Okay, now finally let's we are running out of time, but there are just two things which we have to do. So we have to add a model to open on this click, and what we also have to do is we're gonna add some form, and we're gonna add new events to this one. Okay, so let's go to app component TS, as we have to import some new things. So we're gonna do it like this. We're gonna import view child, and I'm gonna get back to this one in a second. And I'm gonna define this view child for a model directive. This is something which we need for to pass data between model and app, but we're gonna get back to this soon. I'm gonna add model body, so this is our body of our model here, and now what we have to do is we need to trigger our model on this button. So let's find this button here. This is this one. This is a button. And what I'm doing here, I'm using this frame show because this is how we called our model, frame. So this is the name. And now we are using option frame show. So this is what's going on, right? So now when we click on it, it's running, or it's calling this function show on the model, and this is showing our model. So there is not very interesting for us. It's just for you if you would like to know how you want to use models, which are very handy. But let's move to something more interesting, which is form. So what we want to do now, we want to display this form. We want to get data from this form, and on save, on click on this button, we want to add this one to our table, to our array, sorry. So what we have to do, we need to use forms module, which is another module from Angular, to which you have to import if you want to use forms. It's actually already here, so we don't gonna import it again. And now let's do something like this, because I'm gonna show you a very interesting thing which is called two-way data binding, which is very cool about Angular. So let's create a new variable here. I'm gonna call it name string. So now I'm doing static typing. Like this. So we have a variable name, and let's change body of our model. Where is body? This one. So this is empty. I'm gonna replace this with something like this. And now let's have a look at this one. So this is so-called two-way data binding. So we have input, and next to it we have a value. And let's see what's gonna happen now. So now, as you can see, Angular is taking care of assigning value from our front-end part to the JavaScript itself, right? So as soon as I start typing, it automatically assigns whatever value we have inside this form into our variable. So we don't have to do, you know, things like we've been doing in React or Vue or JavaScript, like get value, get value, get value. Angular will take care of it. Now, but this is just one way, right? So this is one way because this is from our front of our application back to our JavaScript. But why is it called two-way? Let's add some button here. So we have button, which we'll call change name function. And yeah, and now what we want to do, we want to add this change name function to our code, which will looks like this. Hold on, I'm just messed up my workspace here. Okay. Oh, come on. Yeah, okay. Where is it? Oh, come on, I missed the preview. Where is one? No, it's not this one. Hold on. Yeah, okay. So we are adding our function here. Compiled successfully. I just lost my preview. Give me a sec to recompile this one. So as you can guess, what we will try to do now, we're gonna try to change this value programmatically, right? So this value. So now we are setting this using form, and now if we call this one, we are changing this one. So this is called this two-way data binding, right? So we, regardless of how we change the data, Angular is taking care of displaying this correctly, right? So this is very cool, especially when you work with like forms, and you don't have to take care of you know, gathering all the data from forms, right? So this is really cool. Okay, now let's to finish our application, we're gonna import another module. So we have this forms module. Now we're gonna import reactive forms module. It was gonna be used, and it's gonna be used in our form. So we have reactive forms. Now inside app component TS, we need to import forms. And I know it's complex. I mean, I know it's more difficult than its view. I know it's more complex than I know it's more complicated, but that's how it is. I mean, Angular is more complex than other frameworks, but it's also, I would say, more powerful. So there is a price for it, but this pays off when it comes to building like huge applications. So the bigger application you build, then the better the more you get out of it, more structure, and yeah, just better it is. Okay, so we have this form here. Okay, this icon doesn't look good, and probably this is because we should add some class here. Let's add class prefix. Let's see if this solves. Yeah, so we need to add this class here. Icon, this one, icon map, icon location, where it is, sticky note. Let's save all of this. Okay, now it looks better. So finally, the last thing we have to do is we have to create this function which will collect the data, and then it will add this to that array. So let's do it here. Add new event, right? So this will do it in few steps. So we are creating this new event here, object, with this field. We are taking value from a form which is already there, right? And then actually we didn't use the two-way data binding here. It's simpler, but we could use this two-way data binding which you've seen before. We could just combine them all together, and then we will just push it. So add this event into our array, and then we will just reset all the data. So once we add something here and add it, we want to reset this field. So finally, we just need to call this function add event on this button here. So let's do it in app component. Let's find this button here, button add new event, and let's see if this one works. Oops. Desk. Yeah, it's adding, right? And then counter is refreshing, and we can get rid of those here. Okay, guys, that's it for app, right? I mean, that's it for app. So I know it's a little bit complex. I know there were like few steps which we've been doing and we didn't actually explain them, but this is, for the sake of simplicity, I didn't want you to go that much into details, because if we started going into details, like differences comparing ng content, ng template, then we would spend like an hour just on ng content, ng template. I just wanted to give you this overview and this feel how it works. So I hope this feel is good overall. What I mean is that I know it's more there are definitely simpler frameworks, simpler libraries. So actually there was this fight in the past that only Angular should be called framework because it was compiling the code like TypeScript. Now it's changing. But on the other hand, it has really a lot of advantages. And when you are building a huge application, and trust me, I've been building this application for like 4 or 5 years in a huge corporate. And when you are building this really great, really huge application, the more restriction you have, it's like, making application more stable. So the fact that you are specifying what kind of variable you use, and the fact that you are compiling code, it allows you, it's sometimes kind of pain in the ass, because in JS you would just refresh the page and very often you wouldn't even notice any error. And here you are, compiler will keep on complaining that he doesn't like this, he doesn't like that. But this is actually great. I mean, the more issues you find during the compilation phase, the more stable your project's gonna be. And this is really, really cool on this one. On the other hand, obviously, it's like pulling a shotgun to kill a fly. Obviously, it doesn't make sense to set up the entire Angular environment just to build like, single page application with just few information or a blog. It doesn't make sense. For training purpose, perhaps, but not for the real life application. So yeah, I mean, it's all up to you. As I said on the previous webinars, it's more of like Angular is used on huge projects. Not always, obviously, not always. You can also have a small projects, but in general, when you're building something smaller, people tend to use like React and Vue. But again, Angular is a really, really awesome framework. And they keep on changing it. I mean, in the past there was like Angular JS, and then they switched to Angular 2. It wasn't backward compatible. It was like 2. Then they skipped one version, and now just a few days back, they released Angular 10, and every half a year there is a new version of Angular, which is like getting better and better. So yeah, it's a really cool. It is a really cool framework, and I think it's really worth to learn it, to know it, to at least try to build something with it and find whether you like it or not. Knowing Angular and force you to know TypeScript. So this is another good thing about it, because whether you're gonna stay with Angular or not, then knowing TypeScript is again a very, very good thing for you. Okay, I'm gonna go through a question. So if you have some more questions, please let me know. If something wasn't clear, and probably there were a few steps, let me know, and I'm gonna try to answer all the questions and cover all the doubts. So there's this question. This will be a very noob question to ask at 57 minutes since the webinar started, but as a JS framework, Angular is purely front-end, right? But then you are running a server which handles all the components and sending data. And can you please just shed more light on what actually happening here with our browser? What is the handle on the server? Okay. So this is a good question. It's a good question, and let me show you one thing. I'm gonna show you one. I just today I finished recording one video, one tutorial, not really tutorial for you, about Visual Studio Extension, and why I'm talking about Visual Studio Extension is because probably you know that there is this live server. So we need to start here first. So live server, which runs for you a tiny server. So if you are building like very simple app, let me do it here. So we have downloads, we have this and the Angular here. And I'm gonna create some, let's do it here. I'm gonna create some new file over here. Let's call it like app.html. And I'm gonna just do it something like this and say hello world over here. So if you have file like this, where is it? Hi. Hello, where's my file? app HTML. Where does it go? Where did it go? Source. Oh, this one. Let's move it here. Move. So when you have a file like this, you can simply open this in a browser. But notice one thing: you are opening this one with the file protocol, right? So it's like you would be opening PDF or JPEG. So first of all, you need a server to run on HTTP, because otherwise none of the AJAX call will work for you. So if you are doing AJAX and all this kind of call between browsers and JS, you need server to run. So this is the very first thing. You need to have server to do some of this kind of operation. Second thing is that what happens here is that Angular is like full framework, so it's compiling the code. If you remember one of the previous webinars about bundling and so on, so if you look code of our application, which is, where is it? Here, you're gonna note, look how our code looks like. There is no HTML here, right? We just have this uproot here, and although you can see all the stuff over here, it's simply not there, right? So this is all like generated via Angular, right? See this ng content class. So you have all of that here. But if you check the source code, it's not there. And there is just, look at this one. You have just runtime, polyfill, style, script, main. So, see, I mean, whatever we have here in our source code, whatever code we have here, TypeScript and so on, it's at the end getting compiled into the output.js. So yeah, so this is what Angular is doing, and this is like it is front end, because at the end it creates a front end for you, but it has to compile it first. So this is what it actually does. So you need to install all the dependencies. You have all these transpilers over here, over there. You are compiling SCSS to CSS. You are bundling. You are doing tree shaking. So like we were talking about this ng template, right? So you have like, if this, then display that, and if and else display something else. So it's checking what the condition is, and it's just loading whatever is required. So it's also doing some logic over there. So there are a lot of happening. So it's, it is just taking all this source application, it's getting all the dependencies from node modules, then it's compiling all together them and creating for you this output code. Look at this one. So see, it's like compiling. So this is the output of our application. So at the end, although the project itself is big, and if you check this one, if we go here, probably node modules itself will be see, it's already 450 megabytes. But obviously at the end, our page, which we can see here, is much lighter, and this is like basically what this is what Angular is doing. Let me see if I can build it now for you. It's compiling, and I'm not sure whether it's configured already to build this folder, but let's see. I hope it's gonna do it. Okay, I'm happy that it was clear for you. There is another question from Jennifer. Thank you for the tutorial, David. This was certainly difficult for me to understand. Can you recommend a book or comprehensive online resource of the framework topics? Yeah, sure. Let me just jump back to this one. So this is dist. So this is like the output of our page. So you can see this is just the output source code. So this is our page. And obviously it won't work if I run it like this. Actually, it should work here. Let's see if I can Let me see if this will work that way. Index this index, and let's see if we can run this one with live server. No, it's not gonna work. Anyway, the point here is that this is the output of our application here, and yeah, it's 4.5 megabyte, but it's not 450 megabytes like the entire project. So this is what compiler does. Jennifer, yeah, I mean, I could separate this. I could split this question into two. So one thing is that I would start, if you are new to frameworks at all, I would start with Vue. So if you check this playlist of ours here, you will find previews. You will find the previous. You're gonna find previous webinars. So I would start with checking Vue 1, then go to React. So this is one thing. Second thing, I would start also with learning TypeScript, which is just a great thing to know in 2020 for web developers. Not must have yet, but I think it's gonna be shortly. And then it might be just easier. It might be just easier. Obviously, you can go through the official tutorials, but I think the official Angular tutorial is actually also quite complex. So what I would do, I would encourage you to try to go through our lesson, which we have, but just doing like step by step, component by component, line by line. That will give you more. Insight into it. As far as books are concerned, to be honest, I don't know any. And the reason behind it is this: as I said, Angular is releasing new version every half a year. So any book on Angular is, taking into account time which you require to create the book, to print a book, and so on, and knowing that the book will be obsolete in half a year, even shorter, because just 2 days back or 3 days back they released Angular 10. So assuming that I'm a writer, now I should write a book about what has changed in Angular 10, then give it to some publisher, print it, so the book will be ready in like 1-2 months, and in another 4 months new version will be released. So I think there are not many books on Angular. I would go and check some online resources, starting with this kind of tutorials. And obviously, that you're gonna find plenty of them. What I like this series here because this whole assumption is that you are building the same application using 3 different libraries, different technologies. So this gives you good overview of what are the differences, what are the similarities between them. But definitely I wouldn't start my journey if I was like total newbie. I wouldn't start with Angular. I would start with something lighter like Vue and React. On the other hand, obviously you can start with Angular. It's just gonna be more difficult because it has like more concept. It's more similar, more familiar with object-oriented programming, which is like kind of obvious for Java developers, for example, but it's not there in JavaScript yet. So this concept about classes, instances, constructors, they might be difficult at the very beginning, but once you get them, I think it's getting clear and very handy. It's very useful this objective programming. I hope I answered your question. And if not, just let me know. Okay, guys, so let me know if you have any other question, guys. And if not, then thank you for watching. For now, we're gonna have a break, some holidays in our webinars. For those of you who haven't seen before ones, just to let you know, please subscribe to our YouTube channel, where you can find a previous webinars. So we had 12 webinars in total, starting from HTML, CSS, JavaScript, and so on. So we had a lot of them. Oh, actually, I can't see why this playlist. Oh, there is the playlist, right? So we have like CSS and so on, and we're gonna have more. We're gonna have more of them. Oh, here it is. So we're gonna have more in the future when we're gonna touch backend technologies. So we're gonna learn about Node.js, about PHP, about databases, about Mongo, and many others. So we're gonna have another series for backend developers soon. So yeah, just subscribe so you won't miss it. And yeah, it's kind of awkward because since 3 months every week I was saying see you guys next week, but as I said, for now we're just having holidays, a little break, to prepare content for you. So yeah, we're gonna see each other very soon, but not next week yet. But then again, just as I said, subscribe. Either, I don't know, follow me on the Twitter, follow our YouTube channel, so you won't miss notification when the new series for backend developers will be released by us, and that shouldn't be actually long. So thank you again, guys, for watching. I hope you enjoyed it, and yeah, see you soon. Hey guys, take care.